In this lesson, we will be taking on Chapter 3, Key Issue 3, Why Do People Migrate? First, we will talk about cultural reasons for migrating. Second, the environmental reasons for migrating. Third, migrating to find work. And lastly, trends with gender and age of migrants. First, Rubinstein's laws give us a sense of why people migrate. Most people migrate for economic reasons, but they might migrate for cultural and environmental reasons as well. People migrate because of push factors and pull factors. A push factor induces people to move out of their present location, while a pull factor induces people to move into a new location. There are two types of push factors: cultural push factors and environmental push factors. Let's talk about cultural push factors first. Cultural migration frequently occurs because of political conflict. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees recognizes three groups of people who are forced to migrate for political reasons. These migrants flee because of violent conflict or persecution. First, a migrant might be referred to as a refugee. A refugee has been forced to migrate to another country to avoid the effects of armed conflict, situations of generalized violence, violations of human rights, or other disasters, and cannot return for fear of persecution because of race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group, or political opinion. An internally displaced person has been forced to migrate for similar political reasons as a refugee, but has not migrated across an international border. And lastly, an asylum seeker is someone who has migrated to another country in hope of being recognized as a refugee. Environmental push factors are due to natural disasters, including floods, droughts, or desertification. Pull factors are the reasons that lead people to migrate to a specific place. This might include better cultural or environmental conditions. Let's take a look at Figure 3-22, located on page 92 of your textbook. This map focuses on the political migration of refugees and internally displaced persons. The largest number of refugees originated in Afghanistan and Syria. Now let's look at Figure 3-23, located on page 93 of your textbook. This figure looks at the forced migration of Native Americans taking place in the 1830s. This map shows routes known as the Trail of Tears. These are the routes that the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole tribes took when they were forced to migrate westward in the early 19th century. This migration west was forced rather than voluntary. This inequality was written in law when the Indian Removal Act of 1830 authorized the U.S. Army to remove 5 Native American tribes from their land in the southeastern United States and move them to territory now known as the state of Oklahoma. As you will see referenced from the key, the Choctaw were forced to emigrate from Mississippi, the Seminole from Florida, the Creek from Alabama, the Chickasaw from Mississippi, and the Cherokee from Georgia. The forced removals opened up land for whites to settle and relocated tribes to places that were too dry to sustain their traditional ways of obtaining food. Approximately 46,000 Native Americans were estimated to have been uprooted, and many of them died in the long trek to the west. This route became known as the Trail of Tears, and part of it was preserved as a National Historic Trail. Now we are going to discuss reasons why migrants leave due to environmental push factors. Oftentimes, migrants are pushed from their homes because of physical conditions. Water, for example, either too much or too little, poses the most common environmental threat. Let's take a look at Figure 3-24, looking at flooding in Jakarta, Indonesia. This top left photo can be found on page 94 of your textbook. Many people are forced to move by water-related disasters because they live in a vulnerable area, like a floodplain. Figure 3-25 in your bottom right corner shows the 100-year floodplain. Flooding along the Mississippi River in 2011 covers farmland. A floodplain is an area subject to flooding during a specific number of years, based on historical trends. People living in the 100-year floodplain, for example, can expect flooding on average once every century. Many people are unaware that they live in a floodplain, and even when they do know, they often choose to live there anyway. A lack of water pushes others from their land. Hundreds of thousands have been forced to move from the drylands of Africa because of drought conditions. Deterioration of land to a desert-like condition, typically due to human actions, is called desertification. Desertification is also known as semi-arid land degradation. Taking a look at these figures, 3-26 and 3-27, located on page 95 of your textbook, we can look at the desertification risk in Africa at the left and water sources in the dry season in Tanzania on the right. The capacity of portions of Africa to sustain human life, never very high, has declined recently because of population growth and several years of unusually low rainfall. Consequently, many of these nomads have been forced to move into cities and rural camps, where they survive on food donated by the government and international relief organizations. Looking at the top left image, we see the drylands of Tanzania. People are attempting to obtain drinking water from a dry river bend. The map on the right shows desertification on the African continent. The most severe problems with lack of water in Africa are in the Sahel region. This is the Sahel region, and as you can see, it is very high risk. Now we will discuss migrating to find work. There are economic push and pull factors that cause the majority of migration. Major flows of migration are between Asian countries and out of Asia. And remittances are payments sent home by migrants. Take a look at figure 3-29 located on page 96 of your textbook. This map shows large migration flows between countries in Asia and out of Asia, with the exception of Latin America to North America. This map focuses on largest country-to-country migration flows, specifically between 2005 and 2010. As we can see, most migration flows originate and end in Asia. People that are unable to migrate permanently to a new country for employment opportunities may be allowed to migrate temporarily. Prominent forms of temporary work are found in Asia and in Europe. Asia is both a major source and major destination for migrants in search for work. The world's largest sources of migrants in search for work emigrate from South and East Asia. More than 2 million people annually emigrate from India, Bangladesh, China, and Pakistan. The wealthy oil-producing countries of Southwest Asia have been a major destination for people from South Asian countries of India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, as well as the Philippines, Thailand, and other countries in Southeast Asia. Interestingly, immigrants comprise 84% of the population of the United Arab Emirates, or the UAE, 74% of Qatar, 60% of Kuwait, and 55% of Bahrain. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have the largest numbers of immigrants in the region. Migrants who find work in another country frequently send a portion of the wages that they've earned to relatives back home. The transfer of money by workers to people in the country from which they emigrated is a remittance. This map is found in figure 3-31 and is located on page 97 of your textbook. What this shows is that India and China receive the largest total value of remittances. The largest sources are coming from the United States, Russia, and New Zealand. Remittances are an increasingly important source of wealth for people in developing countries. Ravenstein's theories on migration included most long-distance migrants being male and most long-distance migrants being adult individuals rather than families with children. We have noticed that these trends don't necessarily coincide with those theories. Ravenstein believed that males were more likely than females to migrate long distances to other countries because searching for work was the main reason for international migration, and males were much more likely than females to be employed. This may have been true in the 19th and much of the 20th century. However, female immigrants to the United States began to outnumber male immigrants around 1970. It's also important to note that female immigrants also outnumber males in other developed countries. In developing countries, however, male immigrants still outnumber female ones. There are two reasons that contradict Ravenstein's theory. One, most people migrate to developed countries for job opportunities, and the high percentage of women in the labor force in these countries logically attracts the high percentage of female immigrants. In addition, some developed countries have made it possible for wives to join husbands who have already immigrated. Let's take some time to look at figure 3-32 located on page 98 of your textbook. As you can see here, slightly more than half of migrants to developed countries are female. Migrants to South Asia are more likely to be male. Lastly, we will look at figure 3-34, which is a graph located on page 99 of your textbook. This graph shows international migrants to the United States are disproportionately between the ages of 20 and 39. The number of unaccompanied minors trying to cross into the United States without proper documentation has increased sharply in recent years. Nearly 90% have been males between 12 and 17. Many of these individuals are escaping violence in their home countries. It is sometimes difficult to distinguish between migrants seeking economic opportunities and refugees fleeing from government persecution. The distinction between economic migrants and refugees is important, though, because the United States, Canada, and European countries treat the two groups differently. Economic migrants are generally not admitted unless they possess special skills or have a close relative already in the new country. Refugees, on the other hand, receive special priority in admission to other countries. This is the end of Chapter 3, Key Issue 3. We will spend some time in class discussing what you've learned today.